We are back. Giants Bazeball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko. The host is Tim Haller. The co-host is Patrick Quinlan. And I'm happy to be here. Why? Because I'm talking to two old buddies about a team that I grew up watching when I was a kid. And I just can't get them out of my heart. I am first and foremost a Met fan, but it's not like I haven't followed the Giants every year since 1951 when I was 4.5 years old. My grandfather took me to the Polo Grounds. And I've come to accept that it's one big franchise. The New York Giants, San Francisco Giants. It's not two separate teams, as if you will. And that's why I'm happy. Patrick, tell me why you're happy tonight.
I'm just happy to be with you guys talking baseball, and life's good. Life is good. You know, a lot of college football today. The Warriors are playing a nice little tidy game here against the Bucks, you know, and it's a beautiful thing. Life is good.
Good. I'm glad that, you know, we're blessed in the Bay Area. How many teams do we have to root for? And scarily enough, two of them are in big jeopardy. We have the Warriors are going to move across the bay from Oakland. That's one major disruption. The A's are the most likely of the two teams to stay between the A's and the Raiders at this point. Looks like the Raiders are pretty much gone, and it looks like there's a real good chance with Lou Wolf selling out his majority ownership in the A's, that the way I look at it, baseball's about to change their luxury tax deal. And Lou Wolf is a guy who's always made profits. If it weren't for the luxury tax, the way they run the organization, given the fact that their revenue is incredibly down due to the ballpark that they play in, that profit wouldn't be there. He sees the handwriting on the wall. The players and management are negotiating a new deal this year, and he's gonzo. So I think the issue will be forced, and I think a stadium will be built. So it's interesting in the Bay Area, getting back to it. We have the Warriors. We have, again, the A's, the Giants, 49ers. It's good to live here as I choke. Timmy, what it is?
Hey, I'm happy because I live in the greatest country in the world. One.
Yes, you do. Absolutely,
we
do.
And I'm happy that I get to spend a good while with my friends on this show to talk about a love of mine, a passion, baseball, and specifically the Giants. I will say this. I'm happy that the Warriors are moving back to San Francisco because, as you know, prior to coming from Philadelphia, that's where they ended up. And they went over to the Coliseum after their their issues with the Cow Palace and not being able to build an arena over in in San Francisco. But I'm grateful for that. And I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to throw this out there. This is just an opinion, but I really am confident that, I'd like to just throw this out there for people to kind of chew on for a minute, knowing that the Warriors are going over to the China Basin area or in Mission District.
Mm-hmm.
I see something happening if these politicos can kind of get off their the schneid a little bit. That whole area where the existing Coliseum is, the baseball football complex and the Oracle Arena, can be leveled, and you can build two, state-of-the-art facilities, one for football, one for baseball. It's a great location, great access. They can make the improvements that are necessary, and we can retain two-storied franchises in both football and baseball. And I
enough room for two. Oh, if you get rid of the Oracle.
Yeah, exactly. You level that. You build a stadium. You build a baseball stadium that seats 38,000, and you build a football stadium that seats 70. You have plenty of parking, great access already. The area is basically already been established. It has been for almost 50 years for baseball and football. So
easy accessibility. You got bars already built.
Great location already. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows how to get to the ballpark. And I really am confident if like I said, if some of these politicians can say, okay, let's look at this for the practicality of it. It's a great opportunity for them to rebuild right on that existing site. And if it means that the A's got to play a couple of games at AT&T Park, well, that's okay. It's been done in other major markets. They can do that. And the same thing with the Rays. And the same thing with the Rays.
It was proposed at one time that the A's be a tenant of AT&T Park, and that when early on when they were talking about building it, that was something in the offing.
Right.
Don't know. That makes sense. They do that in New Jersey with the Giants and the Jets, where they.
Yeah, exactly. And that it's only temporary. Nothing would last forever, obviously, until they got these facilities built. And then I'm going to piggytail on that a little bit. I live in sports purgatory. I mean, I really, if you're a Bay Area guy and you live in the desert of California, you have some really awful franchises to want to follow one, but never be a fan of. Absolutely not. Never will I be a Dodger fan. Never will I be an Angel fan. Never will I be a Lakers or a Clippers fan. I'm not going to like the Padres, though I really enjoy their ballpark and their venue, and I'm certainly not going to like the Chargers. So, because the city and county of San Diego again failed to on their ballot to get an issue, something issued or passed for a new stadium, I moved that the Chargers moved to Las Vegas because Las Vegas wants a professional football team or a major sports team, and the Rams build their stadium in Los Angeles like they're going to plan on doing, and they don't need to pair up with either the Raiders or the Chargers. And the Raiders and the A's get new stadiums built right where the existing property is, and everybody's going to be happy. And everybody's going to be, it'll be the days of wine and roses. I'm Mr. Optimist. Right.
As much sense as it makes, have you ever known city government and sports franchises to really do the things that make sense?
Well, you know what? I finally saw it happen when the Giants, and it wasn't so much the city because, of course, they tried to pass a publicly funded,
They were turned down 3 times.
Sure, but they got the money. They got the money to build a stadium, and they own it, which is even better. Because, of course, now the government really isn't too involved. They want to meddle a little bit with certain taxes, with property taxes and such. But the Giants own the ballpark. And that's a great thing for not just the Giants, but for the city of San Francisco and their fan base. Absolutely the best way to go.
Knowledge, the loan is paid off, too, or it's getting close.
Well, the loan is paid off, but there are still some particulars when it comes to annual property taxes, et cetera, which is, really in the whole scheme of things, it's nominal when you break down, how well the Giants are doing financially. It's not a big deal. And I think that they're an organization that is obviously showing their ability to continue to get stronger financially and competitively on the field. The Giants are a good team. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they've got a state-of-the-art. What's that?
They've been putting the profits back. What were you going to say, Patrick?
Yeah, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they have a venue, which is a state-of-the-art ballpark, just gorgeous architecturally. The difficulty with the AT&T Park, as you have in any major urban areas, is access. But, if that's the one downfall about it, well, then so be it. They seem to be working around it relatively well. There are complaints about parking and the cost of parking, but those are the things that you have to accept if you want to have a major sports franchise in your city. Okay, so all of those things being said, I think that the people of Oakland, in the East Bay, and even in the South Bay, that there's a lot of this high-tech money. They can come together and build a stadium. They want to build it on Oakland property proper. They can work something out. Why does the city or the taxpayers have to be responsible for a ballpark? Why can't somebody with some money and some vision come in there and put together a group of investors and build a beautiful ballpark with a storied franchise? I think it can be done. I really do.
Larry Baker basically did it.
Exactly. All of that being said, it just really underscores a lot of what we're experiencing, nationwide about how we put so much faith into the government and how we want the government to take care of us. We need to pull ourselves from our bootstraps a little bit and take some initiative and say, we can come together as a people and make this work. We don't need to have these these elected officials to make our decisions for us. We don't want that to happen. And that is exactly what happened in the case of the managing partnership with the San Francisco Giants. And being from the Bay Area, I'll tell you what, it would not be the same if either of those organizations, the Raiders or the A's, were to leave our beloved Bay Area. They are they're an intrinsic part of our heritage, our history, and the people that live in the Northern California, the Bay Area. So we need to get.
It has to stick in your craw a little bit that the 49ers are not playing in San Francisco.
And it just pains me because new ownership, the Yorks or whoever you want to throw cast blame to, decided it would be a good idea to build a stadium in Santa Clara, which we know now was one of the worst decisions in major professional sports history. It was one of the worst.
Because I don't follow that in my dotage. I only have room in my little brain for baseball. Although I'm a casual fan and was an incredible fan of all the sports back in the day. Tell me what's happening.
I think that with politically, what happened with the 49ers is they were lured by the big tech money, the big dollars that are in the South area, the San Jose, Silicon Valley area. And they lost sight of the girl that brought them to the dance, and that is the fan base from the peninsula and the North Bay and all of that. That's where the fans, basically from Palo Alto north is where the fans for the 49ers generated themselves from. And
you must say there's a changing demographic in San Francisco the last 15 years, let's say, that gives them, at least on paper, the excuse that they were looking for.
Well, it was in a sense, but the 49ers, I'll bet you a dime to a dollar that Eddie DeBartolo, if he was still running that organization, would have found a way to build a stadium somewhere on the peninsula or in the city of San Francisco or even in the North Bay to accommodate the 49ers, that organization. And unfortunately, I think that the new ownership was lured by these flash-in-the-pan high-techers who are going to be here today, gone tomorrow. I mean, their money is established out in the valley, but their interest level is like that of a video game. You play it for a day or two or a year or two, and you get bored with it, and you go on to the next big thing or the next new thing. San Francisco fans, be it Giants, Warriors, or 49ers fans, are very loyal through the bad and through the good. And they've moved to a completely different demographic, a completely different geographic. And the 49ers are a shadow of what they once were. And a lot of that, not all of it, but much of it has to do with the fact that they've placed the venue in south of the city of San Francisco, relatively worlds away, literally, when you think about it, even though geographically it's relatively close, but it's in a completely different place. And as beautiful as the stadium is,
football players respond to the fans in the stadium. It is a game where true fans make a certain noise that motivates football players. No question. Basketball, the same thing. And you could pay $100 for a ticket or $1,000 for a ticket, but that doesn't make you a fan.
No.
So when you're relying on a corporate fan base, you're going to get a lot, and you're not winning in the game, or there's no excitement at the moment. You're going to get a lot of people on cell phones,
on their pads, whatever their little
their iPads.
And they built that stadium around the ability for that stadium to be high-tech worthy. You know, instead of concentrating on the product on the field, what are we doing on the field?
Go right into the trap of Americana, where everything is the newest app, which
bingo.
It's just
it's the nail on the head.
The game itself is just to go out there and hang and eat garlic fries or whatever the hell you do, and party in the lot, and then you get inside, and it's just boredom for them because they're not fans; they're just folk.
Exactly.
Next weekend they'll be at a wine tasting. The weekend after that, which is cool.
Yeah, it is cool. But they, when they were at Candlestick Park, they did the same thing, but they filled that place up, and there was this lure. Patrick, what say you about Candlestick Park? Tell me about your lovely memories about one of the greatest ballparks ever in the history of mankind.
There was more excitement in that
exactly.
Park both football. When you talk about Montana, when you talk about Young, when you talk about Bobby Bonds and Willie Mays going up for a catch on that wire fence, and Mays out jumps him for the ball.
Oh, yeah. Saturday game of the week, 1970. Bobby Tolan hit it. That was bad.
Okay, so, hey, Patrick, tell me some of your stories, some of your memories about our beloved Candlestick Park.
Well, you know what? You know, it's great when you're a kid. It's just all about going to the game when you're like 3. My uncles came down from Montana to work over in Antioch and work on some projects because they needed, to make a livelihood because the logging was diminishing, and they just had an opportunity to do well down here. And they were big baseball guys. So to get the okay from my mom, so you go see Willie at 3. Well, when you grow up in that ballpark, it was never, ever, ever, ever about the weather. You actually just bundle up. Your mom says this is what you'll need. Arctic chill, just brutal. I mean, and you know, become an adult, you realize, wow. And then, of course, you see what a beautiful ballpark where they could actually play the sport 8 miles away.
Patrick, tell me about those Parkers that the Giants needed in the bullpen and how thick they were.
These were
thick, heavy-duty Alaskan Parkers.
Alaskan, like, big time. And they'd go from head to toe with huge hoods, and the jackets went down to the top of their shoes, down below.
To the ankles, exactly.
No, these were no joke. And so when I'd sleep over, night game to day game, because I slept over a ton, is you put a bunch of those in the trainer's room. I was even so sick, I'd just sleep in front of certain players' lockers. McCovey, Evans, Sadek, Montefusco. I was sick. And you just layer about 4 of those and make a little bed and just cover yourself up with them, because Eddie Logan, we had about, I don't know, probably about 12 of those. I always wanted to buy one or you know, from Eddie because they were so warm. But it was just unbelievable. So you never thought about the weather because Mays played there. McCovey, Jimmy Hart, Juan, Perry, you go on and on and on. All the guys that played there, and they sucked it up, and they never said anything in my 4 years ever. You know?
They never really complained about it, did they, Patrick? They loved it. They were there to play the game. They didn't, you know, it was different because we had an insight that most people weren't privy to, and that was that these guys were there to play a game, and they loved it. And they realized what the difficulties.
Yeah, you play hardball, and then you just realize after years and years and years. I mean, what a lot of people don't realize is, like, look, we had so many great teams in the 60s. 6 second-place finishes. We're in the 62 World Series. I mean, you know, and that was only 10-team leagues. And it was brutal because the competition was so fierce in that decade. Unbelievable. So, anyways, it was our edge. You know, we had, we had 7 managers in the 70s, and we had a handful of managers in the 60s, you know, because Horace was he had his drinking buddies, and there's no really continuity. Well, players really didn't care who was managing them because they're grown men. I mean, Mays, McCovey, those are the guys, Perry, Marshall, Jimmy Hart, Davy, those are the guys that ran the team. You know, I mean, it was like they're old school. You know, we just need, you're the title guy. You're the guy that has the title. But there wasn't really great even Herman and
there were some exceptions. Charlie Fox was an exception.
Charlie was solid. Al Dark, you know, and Al Dark had and all that history, but they never cared about it. So you just bundle up. So as a fan going, you bundle up, and it was great. And they had all the separations there between the box seats and the reserve, and they had that big aisle in between them. So you'd always see your friends when I was going to games as a kid before I got the Bad Boy gig, and then you could take down and sit in box seats, and you know, it just didn't really matter. You know, you brought thermoses of chicken broth, or you brought thermoses
hot chocolate,
thermoses with that, hot chocolate or coffee. So you were good. You just packed up. You just make sure you packed up, because if you don't, you're gonna freeze your ass off. You don't want to leave to go up the the long stairwells there to get coffee or something, because it's middle of the game. You're set in there. You're stuck.
Right. The game's so more important than the environment
and getting that hit of coffee or cocoa. But and just all the memories of watching all those great players, because you always had the visiting team to come in. You know, like the programs of the great marquee and the old scoreboard out there in right center field. You know, the Knicks series, and you're excited to see Stargell and Schmitty and all those guys.
Oh, I was just thinking the Pirates were among the 2 or 3 teams. The Braves would come in. That would be very exciting. Naturally, the Dodgers. The Dodger rivalry. Tell me something about that and how it was continued from when they were both in New York. The Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Giants had this fierce rivalry. It was intensified when Leo DeRocher left the Brooklyn Dodgers to come manage the New York Giants. And it was right around the time Jackie Robinson was being called up. And it was just an incredible rivalry that managed to transcend the continent. And
Well, and that's what the game is supposed to do. I mean, the arena or the venue shouldn't be the focus of the game. And unfortunately, and what happened with Candlestick, it had its own lore. I mean, after a while, Candlestick became its own ghost or its own spirit. But we never overlooked the fact that they were playing a game in that stadium first. And you could play it's like when we were kids growing up, we'd go down to the park and play on this crappy rock-filled ballpark. We didn't care where we were playing. We were playing. And I know it was the same for those guys. And then after it was said and done and over, and you sit around and you reminisce and you talk about the old fields you used to play on, or Candlestick Park. That's when it took on a life of its own, but not at the time that you were doing it. You were involved playing, and a place like Candlestick, it takes on its own personality. Just like you can say that for Forbes Field and Sportsman's Park and all of these
Crosley
great
Field and Tiger
Comiskey and Wrigley and all of those.
Exactly.
But you cannot
Wrigley was brutal.
across this Candlestick anywhere but in San Francisco.
Oh yeah, and that's the beauty of it.
No other place. No other place because the wind, the hawk comes in around 3:00. You never know. You never know.
Oh God, it was cold. There were nights as a fan with being bundled up because I went to an afternoon game against Cincinnati in 1966, my first year in California, stationed out here in the Air Force, Travis Air Force Base. We drove on a beautiful sunny afternoon to Candlestick, and I'll be honest, I don't even remember if it was a night game or a day game that I think it was a day game, but by the end of the day, by 5:00, we're freezing our asses. It was just unbelievable. The coldest wind ever. So from then on, always dressed up, and there were times as dressed up as you can get, it was still freezing. No question about it. You'd earn this little pin that they give out called the Candlestick, and it was, and guys would have them on their hats, pin them on their hats. They'd have 40 of them on their hats because if you stuck around in a night game to the very end, you get. I think that's how it worked. If you
extra innings and all that.
Yeah,
extra innings.
Good times.
But it was unplayable. I mean, it was like unplayable almost sometimes.
Yeah. Oh.
You believe?
Yeah, and there were times too. The fog would come in on the.
Oh, no,
maybe not at the same time. I think if it's foggy, it's not going to be as cold. But there were, and I could be wrong about that too.
Oh yeah, there were a lot of cold nights when that fog would roll in over the point, and I'd be sitting down that right field line, bundled up, every layer that I could possibly find, 5, 6 layers sometimes underneath my uniform, and then a jacket, and I would sit in that right field line just curled up. It'd be 7th, 8th inning, 6th, 7th, 8th inning, and that fog would crawl in over the point, and sometimes, and Patrick, you can remember this, the visibility was 30 feet out on the field.
Oh, I remember a day game. I remember a night game in '75 against Atlanta that it was really, really wall-to-wall fog in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Damn near. I mean, it was just nothing is like the stick. Nothing was like it because when they enclosed it for the Niners in '70, which was a joke because the original Candlestick Park was really sweet. I mean, we grew up there, man. It was sweet, and you see all the great pictures, and I remember it, as a kid. But pictures are great. It was sweet, but when the Candlestick when they enclosed it, it was just huge, like the hugest stadium in baseball. Huge. It was huge.
Right.
And that wind and everything come up the peninsula and stuff and hop over from Olympic Club and the coast from Hawaii and jump over the Candlestick Hill there. And it'd come in there like a whirlpool. And it was so unpredictable. That's why Mace had 2 swings in the jet stream. And how Mac lost all those homers.
And Mays lost homers, too. Mays must have lost 50 homers. Easy.
Mays would have had 8+. Mac would have had 6+. Because literally with a 5-ounce ball, it was just unfair, the conditions, because it's just, I mean, they had their up years, but we just didn't win World Series there, and there's a lot of factors there.
Guys, we're short on time. I flashed on something that is, I think, the strength of the Giants all those years. Their ability to produce outfielders year after year after year in their system that they brought up. They were supplying the league. Alous were going out there. Moda was going out there. It was unbelievable that
Bonds,
so
Matthews, Maddox, Bernie Williams, George Foster, the great George Genovese. Horace was a big guy who liked power guys. He was like the Al Davis of baseball. He liked power guys. That's why we didn't win enough in the 60s. We didn't store up enough in the pitching corps. And Horace was like that. He was he liked his beverage, and he was a kind of a top fueler guy. That's why the league ran the team in 72, 3, and 4. And Lurie bought it and saved him, and Jeff Feeney helped operate and brought him to handle day-to-days. And it was like, he's like, we got Mays, got McCovey, got Cepeda, got all these powers. And then Horace got all weirded out about Cepeda's health, and then traded him for Sadecki, and then Jim Ray got hurt, and just there was a lot of weird. It was odd because we had so many managers there.
On paper, when that deal went down, Sadecki was terrific coming in, and he also happened to be terrific in the '73 season with the Mets. But
he was never. He was never even with Cepeda. I don't think it was still a lopsided deal.
Yes, but they were forced into it because neither McCovey or Cepeda should have been in left field.
And that was a big deal.
Yeah,
that's hardcore.
And there was no DH in those days.
They had a righty and a lefty. You're not going to platoon.
Well, there's never been DH in the National League anyway, but that ballpark that before they closed it in. And the way the Giants were, 1 through 6, 1 through 7, every one of those guys was capable of hitting 20, 25, 30 home runs. Right. And that includes my father, and that included my dad. Jimmy Ray Hart, my old man, Willie McCovey, and then of course Mays, and Bonds. These guys were those teams were put together to hit home runs,
Oh, on purpose.
And you mentioned Matthews and Maddox. That was like an after. That was after the end of basically the era of producing outfielders. Those guys were terrific. Maddox was about as good a fielder as anybody that, save Willie, that we ever saw out there. Maybe save Bonds, too. Maybe save both Bonds. But Maddox...
Can't trade Maddox for Willie Montañez. And those George Genovese guys. And I remember talking with Bobby one time, and he goes, you know what, man? You know what's great about that outfield? Because I brought it up to him at an old-timers game. And he goes, me, Matthews, and Maddox were arguably the fastest outfield in history because they all ran 100 under 10. He said they were lethal. They were lethal. But you see, Horace didn't have any money. So Matthews went to Ted Turner. Maddox went to Philly Montañez. Bobby went to Yankees for Bobby Mercer. Bobby represented himself. Horace
not a good. That never made sense for anybody.
Well, Mercer
was not happy.
And Horace got racist on him, and they had an argument in his office after like their seventh cocktail. And
really?
Robby just aired it out on him. And Horace said, "Your blankety blank blank will never play here again." That's how that went down. Tragic. So that was the second worst trade. You know, when they traded Mays, I mean, he was at the end of his career, but when I was a kid, it was Will.
We had George Foster in there. You can mix that for Frank Duffy.
And Foster was the guy that May said, wrong guy, because it should have been Bernie Williams, because George knew he was going to be a power-hitting outfielder. George knew, Willie knew that. Willie knew that.
For those of you out there, that's not the same Bernie Williams as played with the Yankees.
No. This is another outfielder.
Right.
So,
I know that.
Group. Yeah, so
yes.
That was
you also had guys like Goodson,
Gooden,
Goodson, yeah.
Ken Anderson.
Anderson was so solid.
Was great athlete.
Phenomenal.
Great 71 team, switch hitter, solid.
Yeah.
Solid.
And but I still think the worst trade that ever went down in San Francisco Giants history, aside from the one we just experienced last year, the Matt Moore for was when my old man, when my father traded Jack Clark for David Green, Jose Uribe, and that
Dave LaPointe.
And Dave LaPointe. My God, still I have nightmares over that deal. And and my dad said to me the night before he made the deal, and he goes, we're sitting in his bedroom at his desk. And he goes, I'm going to trade Jack. And I said, if you trade Jack Clark, I won't talk to you for 2 weeks. I don't think I talked to him for a month. It was the worst trade in the history of the and my old man, as much as I loved him, my dad was a much better coach than he was a general manager. That's for damn sure. And he would have been a much better manager, a field guy than he would have been, than he was as an executive, and that's okay. That's my opinion. But when you're slinging around guys like Jack Clark, you better,
yeah.
You talk about schools
get a little bit more back than, what was it, David Green?
And they couldn't find him. He was somewhere in the jungle of Nicaragua doing cocaine and drinking with all the native women down there. He was a mess. And the best thing that came out of that deal was Jose Uribe, who at the time
he wasn't even Jose. They had to give him
Jose Gonzalez.
Right, he was Jose Gonzalez. And what's very interesting, I think it's his nephew or cousin, more likely his nephew, Uribe, helped the Giants later on down the road. And,
87, 89 with Robby. They were a great double play combo.
Oh, they were great.
Robby and Will. Yeah.
Hey, you brought up the Robby, and I don't even think I've told Tim this story, Patrick. As you may or may not know, I was the Topps representative in the 80s and the 90s.
Oh, that's solid, Ralph.
Yeah, that was the greatest thing in the world. They paid me per
baseball cards with the
every summer I'd go up to the Northwest League, I'd do the California League, and I'd meet and greet and offer a contract to new players to organize ball, so we could obligate them to when they get to the big leagues, we have to pay them bucks. And
right now, let me ask you this now. Did you have to get everyone to sign, or did they give you a list of guys that you wanted to sign?
They give me a list of guys who haven't been signed. So they give me rosters. I would there was a big book that they had of everybody that they need contracts for, and the idea, because in the 1950s, their Topps would go to the minors to sign players, and they'd sign the players only that they thought were going to make it. So
yeah, and I still have my $5 check.
Do you really?
I still have my
wow.
pink $5 check, and I got to pull it out. I'm going to dig it out and take some photographs of it, and then I'm going to frame it.
Oh, yeah,
Do
that.
Oh, wow. I gave more $5 checks out than you could imagine. So I get to Fresno, and Bill Thompson is there. He's the general manager, and Wendell Kim is the manager.
Guy, announcer as well?
Yes, the Bill Thompson that was the original third guy in the booth for Lon and Russ. So I'm just in baseball heaven because I get there early, get to hang with Bill Thompson. I've been going to Fresno, over the years, and he's one of those guys that would just love to gab about the old days. And I get there, and there's only one unsigned player in the entire locker room that year. It was Robby Thompson. He was new, and they instead of coming in short A ball, they brought him right into A ball like they did Timmy and high A. He was a prospect. He's a little rangy guy. I'm thin. He's thin. We're about 5'10". I weigh 150. He probably weighed 160, a little more muscular. But a little guy, and I've given the speech 1,000 times. I go, Robby. My name is Ralph Tyko. I represent Tops. I have a $5 check for you, which obligates you to, which obligates us to pay you big bucks when and if you make the major leagues. And he looks at me and he goes, when and if I make the major leagues? You got to say when I make the major leagues. And
right.
He was pissed at me. It wasn't a matter of am I going to make it? It's a matter of when I make it.
Yep.
So, and I said, Robby, I'm going to make it up to you. I'm going to tell you a little story about the Thompson name. There was Bobby Thompson, had no P in his name, and he hit the home run, the shot heard around the world. And then there was Hank Thompson, who had a P in his name, but he was prone to drinking a little bit. He was the Jim Ray Hart of the day.
Yeah,
pro. He was one of the first blacks to cross the line. He crossed the line first with the St. Louis Browns before he came to the Giants. And he could hit. And he robbed a liquor store, spent time in jail after his career, and what have you. So I told him about the differences in Thompson and what have you. He ended up thinking I was a pretty good guy. But the look in his eyes and how when I gave him that option, when and if, that story, I knew he was going to make it. There was no, this was probably about 84 or maybe 85, came up in 86 with Will Clark. Mm-hmm. He was in Fresno like a year and a half before. And I'm telling you, there are overachievers. There are guys that their intensity, their can't take failure brings them through. So I contend that there's a lot of guys with very, very, very equal ability. And it's a combination of having somebody like you who, that can get behind you, a coach or play a development guy, a rover, a manager that really speaks your cause. And if you have that internal thing that'll get you through. Timmy, you had it. You never had I know just from talking to you, you don't rehearse those things. You can't get yourself up for the game like in football because there's 160 games. It has to come. It can't be too high, too low, and it has to be from within.
Yes.
That's why I will always think of Robby as my favorite all-time ball player, no matter what.
Right.
Again.
Well, Al Rosen and Roger loved him.
Oh, they built it. they built Jack Clark or Will Clark, signed him and Brantley the same day. They both came out of Mississippi.
Now, actually, let me back you up on that. The general manager who drafted and signed those guys, his name was Tom Haller.
Oh,
exactly.
Is it?
In my father's my dad's regime brought in all those guys and Robby Thompson as well that actually ended up really being competitive.
I didn't know.
Very.
Oh, yes, that was a very competitive bunch of guys.
87, 89 teams were solid, man.
Yeah. And those guys, along with the trades for like Kruko and Kuiper and a lot of those guys, those are guys that my dad brought in.
Chili
Jeff Leonard, they got from
Chris
Houston.
Brown.
Did your dad get Jeff Leonard?
He did.
Oh, wow. That very solid ball player.
Yes.
Very solid.
Well, actually, I think Jeff Leonard came over prior when Frank was still managing. So Dad was the general manager at the time. He made a deal with I want to say the Houston Astros to bring Jeffrey Leonard over. So a lot of those guys, a lot of those components, those players, were a part of those winning clubs with Rosen and Roger Craig.
Oh, yeah.
And let's not forget Charles Chili Davis.
Oh, Chili.
Came up as a catcher.
And I'll never forget meeting Chili. The first time I met Chili, I can't even remember how old I was, but Dad was the director of the minor leagues at the time, and we were down in Casa Grande, and I was working out with the guys down there, and Dad told me to go work out with the single A club. Go work out with them, take ground balls, hit, do all that, and I was 14 years old, 15. And there was a guy on that team. I can't even remember who it was. It escapes me. I think it was. Anyway, I can't remember what it was. He said, "Go down over to the cage and pick up the balls, and then take some cuts. There's a guy down there hitting right now," and it was Chili Davis, and he was this kid, skinny, strong, quick hands. And he was hitting ropes from both sides of the plate. And we struck up this friendship. And it was just the coolest thing. And then he said, "Well, you better get in here. I'm getting a little tired. You better get in here and you take your rips." And I'm just a little pimpled, one whisker kid, pimpled, skinny, short, weak. And I'll just never forget that day for as long as I live. And then a little bit later in our session in the cage, my old man walked down to the cage and started talking to Chili. We were all sitting there, picking up balls, and my father, asking Chili, "How do you feel? I think we're going to put you in Double-A this year." And Chili was excited about that. And then he asked my dad, "Well, when do you think I'm going to get to the big leagues?" And my dad said, "Let's just take it a day at a time, buddy. Let's just take it a day at a time."
That's the same idea.
That's the same mentality. Exactly. It's the same.
All those guys. Oh, yeah.
Will Clark was the same way.
Guys, they know, man.
Will Clark, when he signed with the Giants, they sent him right away to Phoenix to AAA ball.
So
he spent a few weeks.
They sent him to A-ball. They sent him to Fresno first.
Okay, and then I guess it was the following year they invited him.
He went up. Quickly,
right, but the following year they invited him to spring training, so he worked out with the big club, and I believe he started the year out in Phoenix. And somebody asked him, he was throwing up a baseball in his hand, just sitting on the bench, and somebody asked Will the Thrill. They said, "That's." What do you think? What do you think about the baseball here or whatever? What do you think about AAA? And he goes, "This isn't my league. I belong in the major leagues." And he was talking up that AAA baseball. And it's that kind of mentality, that no denial. I know I'm good enough. I don't care what anybody says or does. I'm going to make it. I'm just going to make it. And Will Clark had it. Robby
before that.
Oh, yeah.
Before that, when he's like a junior growing up in Louisiana. Some of these just, they're just so gifted. I mean, they just know. I mean, you just get.
Oh, Will Clark had that sweet swing, as did Jack Clark. I mean, bless scouting is everything. The way I look.
Jack the Ripper, man.
Yeah, broke in at 19 years old. It was the George Genovese signing. Broke in at 19 years old. That guy was my favorite player of all time on the Giants.
High school out of West Covina.
West Covina High, yeah. And I can just tell you, from my own personal experience, that's the kind of player that I was. Even though it was a little difficult being the son, I came up in that second generation era of players, the Boones and the Bonses, and there were a few of us, They did a big old Baseball America thing where they put me on the cover, and then they put the sideline, Barry Bonds and Griffey Jr. and all these second generation kids or third generation kids. And that was pressure. That was probably the only real pressure that I felt I had to live up to was, being Tom Hender's son. But there were a lot of other guys, like Gary Davenport, he played with the Giants organization. There were some of us guys that were trying to follow in the footsteps of our fathers, and I'll tell you what, there was like this switch that was always kind of on, and we were always ready to go. It didn't matter. We were just ready to play the game of baseball. And I certainly had that same mentality. I wanted to, my goal was to get to the big leagues and contribute. That's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be on a major league club and play every day and contribute to the success of that team. That's exactly what my motivation was.
Wow. I envy you, your talents, but more than that, your talent, but more than that, I envy you, your inner drive. Because I know there are a lot of guys with talent in any profession that just won't do the things that unsuccessful people refuse to do.
You know what, though? I believe that all of us have that in ourselves. We do. But we listen too much to the outside voices, the negativities. We let those, because I'll tell you what, when I was growing up, I was still in high school or whatever, my old man says, you're not good enough. You're going to have to work a lot harder. I could have let that hurt me. I could have let that discourage me. I heard other guys, like when I was in the Orioles organization, on some guys' charts I was high, and on other guys they didn't want me even in the organization. Well, thank God they traded me because I didn't feel really warm and fuzzy with the Orioles organization. But I'll tell you this, I was there and I performed, and nobody could turn that switch off. I didn't care. If I had let those negative things get into my head, it would have defeated me. And I bet you everybody that didn't, most people, if you have to have a little bit of ability to play, if you get to a certain level, whether it's single A or double A or in Major League Baseball, you already have some talent. It isn't because somebody feels sorry for you. You think Mike Piazza in the 62nd round was going to camp thinking, I suck, I'm a 62nd round player? I don't think so. He got an opportunity and he ran with it, and now he's got a plaque up in Cooperstown.
Gentlemen,
well, that's the guy who's worked his
three major fears are of a ball player.
The three major fears
are fear of success, fear of failure, and fear that your baseball Annie has an Adam's apple.
Oh, God. I was going to say fear of that really sharp breaking ball.
Okay, well, it's all how you think. Gentlemen, on that, I will say that it's been a pleasure, and I look forward to
Patrick.
next week. And
Patrick, stay away from those girls with Adam's apples, Patrick. Just saying.
Exactly. Yeah, we're going to try to get Joe.
Careful. There's a number of things you have to do in life. You got to be careful. That's all.
He's down there in Sedona, Arizona, right?
Save yourself the trouble. Scat it out. Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much. And I'll tell everybody out there to keep on keeping on. And we'll be back next week, like it or not.
Thanks for a great show, you guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Jimmy. Pastor Quinlan, Tim Haller, I'm Ralph Tyko. This is the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm out of Alameda, California, in the northern part. Where are you, Patrick? What part of the Bay Area are you in? I forgot.
I'm over there in Marin County.
Short. You're in Marin?
Over in Marin. Over in Marin.
Beautiful. We're in God's country. And you are, too.
I'll
let you right on the air because I keep forgetting that. For a year I've been forgetting. Pete Rickard lives in the desert.
Ooh.
Down there.
Yeah, well, isn't Joey down there in Sedona, Timmy?
Joey's in Sedona. I'm in Indian Wells. Rick Rickard lives down here. Don Sutton, Steve Garvey, they're all my neighbors.
Well, you tell Pete Rickard when you see him that the Topps guy has the same 50-50 guarantee on those pens that we give out. I guarantee Rickard, I'd say, here's a pen with a 50-50 guarantee. 50 feet, I'm out of here, or 50 seconds. And he'd laugh.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Thank you, guys. We'll talk to you. Pete Rickard was the general manager of the Palm Springs Angels at one time.
Yes, he was.
And a minor league pitching coach with the A's when I got to know him in the 80s.
Yeah, the Gene Autry years when Gene Autry would just take his golf cart down to see his Angels because they trained in Palm Springs there for a while.
I love that stadium.
Goes, I'm the Cowboy. I want my team in my backyard. He was the best.
Right. That it was so hot in Palm Springs. They had the little spritzers on, the misters.
Oh, yeah.
Brutal.
But brutal, but the greatest view, that mountain in Palm Springs.
Yeah, man.
Whatever it's called. Yeah. All right, guys. We'll catch you on the flip-flop. Next week it is.
All right, now. Have a blessed
Be good.
Everybody out there, catch you then. Adios, everybody. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.